All right, welcome back to the deep dive. For all of our listeners who love getting into the nitty-gritty of, well, pretty much anything, but especially when it comes to like the human mind and how it works,
Yes.
you're in for a treat because today we are going deep on something called demand characteristics. And before you tune out thinking this is going to be some boring research jargon, stick with us. Because this is like getting a peek behind the curtain in psychology research, you know?
Right.
Understanding how these demand characteristics can actually shape the outcomes of studies is really pretty fascinating.
I couldn't agree more. And it's a real pleasure to be here to kind of unpack this with you all as we explore, the science of human behavior. We've got to be aware of all these little intricacies, right?
Right.
And especially this kind of interplay
Yeah.
between the people doing the research and the people participating in it. And that's
Yeah.
where these demand characteristics really come into play.
So true. So let's break it down for everyone listening. What exactly are we talking about when we say demand characteristics?
Okay, so in the simplest terms, you can think of demand characteristics as like these little hints or clues that sort of pop up within a research study. And these hints, they might lead the participants to start forming ideas about what the researchers are actually trying to find out.
Oh, interesting.
And once they've got that interpretation in their head, well, they might start to change their behavior, even subconsciously, to fit that interpretation.
So it's like they're trying to solve the puzzle of the experiment.
Yes, exactly. Like trying to figure out, okay, what's the real purpose here?
Right, right.
And the thing is, these cues, these demand characteristics, they're like these sneaky little variables that the researchers didn't intend to include.
Yeah.
But they can really mess things up because they can influence how people act in ways that weren't part of the original plan.
Wow. Sneaky is right.
It really is.
I mean, it makes sense, though, when you think about it. I mean, you're in this unfamiliar situation.
Yeah.
You know, you're trying to figure out what's expected of you.
Mm-hmm.
It's natural to start looking for those little clues.
Absolutely. And I think the work of Martin Orne really highlighted this. Years ago, he was one of the first to really emphasize how the participants in research aren't just these passive subjects.
Right.
They're actively trying to interpret the situation they're in.
Oh, totally. So we know participants are looking for clues and maybe even changing their behavior. But why? What's the motivation behind that?
Well, I think a lot of it boils down to this idea that participants, they know they're being watched, right? They're being observed, their responses are being recorded, and that can create this natural desire to perform well, to kind of, meet those perceived expectations, even if nobody's directly telling them what those expectations are.
So they're thinking like, ooh, how do they want me to say here?
Exactly, or how do I come across as the good participant or the helpful one?
It's like when you were back in school taking a test. You're trying to figure out what the teacher's really asking, even if the question seems straightforward.
Exactly. You're trying to read between the lines. And in a research setting, this can lead to people giving answers that they think are more socially acceptable, or maybe acting in a way that they think will please the experimenter,
Yeah.
even if it means not being totally genuine. And as we see from what we've been reading, we can't totally eliminate that the participants are always going to interpret the situation, but at least by understanding how they're doing it,
Right.
we can start to account for it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So let's get into the specifics then. What are some of the common giveaways, those demand characteristics that might tip participants off about what a study is really about?
Okay, so let's think about a few different sources.
All right.
Sometimes it can be as simple as, rumors or information about the study that's already circulating.
Okay.
Maybe participants have talked to people who've already been through the study,
Right.
or details have leaked out. Maybe accurate, maybe not, but either way, that can really shape their expectations.
Yeah, like knowing the ending of a movie before you watch it, it just totally changes the experience.
Exactly.
So that's one thing, but what else?
Well, believe it or not, even the physical environment
Oh, interesting.
of the laboratory itself can provide these subtle cues.
Really?
Yeah. Think about it. If you walk into a lab and it's all like clinical and sterile, you might assume the study has something to do with illness or dysfunction.
That makes sense.
Whereas if it's a more relaxed, informal setting, you might
Yeah.
get a totally different impression.
So the room itself is like whispering secrets.
Yes, exactly. And then there's the communication from the experimenter,
Right.
which can be explicit, like in the instructions they give, or it can be these tiny little nonverbal cues, like a certain tone of voice,
Oh, wow.
a smile, a raised eyebrow, in response to a participant's answer.
So even something as subtle as a facial expression
Oh,
can
absolutely.
influence how someone participates?
We are incredibly tuned in. to those kinds of signals,
Yeah.
often without even realizing it.
That is wild.
It is, and that leads us to these different roles that participants might take on.
Yes, I wanted to ask you about that.
Yeah.
Because the idea that participants might sort of adopt a specific role during an experiment is fascinating.
It is, and researchers like Weber and Cook, they've actually identified a few common ones.
Okay, so break it down for us.
So first, you've got what they call the good participant role, sometimes called the please you effect.
The please you effect, I like that.
These are the people who are actively trying to figure out what the researcher's hypothesis is, and then they try to behave in a way that confirms it.
So they're like the eager helpers?
Yes, exactly.
Even though they don't know what they're helping with.
Precisely. And then on the flip side, you have the negative participant role, or the screw you effect.
Oh, wow.
These folks, they also try to figure out the hypothesis, but their goal is totally different.
Yeah.
They want to undermine the study.
But they're like the rebels of the research world.
Exactly, the contrarians.
Yeah.
And you've got the faithful participant. They're the ones who really want to follow the instructions perfectly.
Yeah.
And just behave naturally, even if they have some inkling of what the study is about.
So they're like the ideal participant, right?
In theory, yes. But even they can be swayed by their own interpretations.
Right.
And lastly, there's the apprehensive participant.
Okay.
And these individuals are mostly worried about how the experimenter is judging them.
So they're all about making a good impression.
Exactly. More so than maybe giving completely accurate responses.
That's interesting. So can you give us an example of how these different roles might actually play out in a real study?
Sure. Let's say we're doing a study on whether people are more likely to donate to a charity
Okay.
after watching a video about its work.
Got it.
Now, imagine our good participant. They might suspect the study is trying to encourage donations, and they might consciously decide to donate,
Okay.
even if they wouldn't have otherwise.
So they're trying to help prove the hypothesis.
Exactly. Now, the negative participant with the same suspicion might deliberately choose not to donate.
Just to mess with the results.
Exactly.
Wow.
The apprehensive participant might donate a small amount just because they think that's what's expected.
Yeah, like the socially acceptable thing to do.
Right. And then you've got your faithful participant who'll try to watch the video and make a genuine decision based on their reaction.
But even then, their decision might be subconsciously influenced.
It might be. Yeah, it's really hard to completely separate yourself from those expectations.
Right, because even if you're trying to be objective, you're still in this environment that's shaping your perception.
Exactly.
So how do these demand characteristics actually impact the validity of the research?
Well, the main concern is something called internal validity.
Okay, and internal validity, for those of us who aren't scientists, is?
It basically means how sure can we be that the changes we see in the outcome, the thing we're measuring, were actually caused by the thing we changed.
Right.
Not by some other sneaky variable. But if participants are changing their behavior based on what they think the study's about, well, then it gets really hard to know what's really driving the results.
It's like trying to figure out if a new fertilizer makes your plants grow better when you also gave them more sunlight
And
water at the same time.
exactly. It's a great analogy.
You can't isolate the cause and effect.
You can't. And on top of internal validity,
Yeah.
demand characteristics can also mess with external validity.
And then
External validity is all about whether the findings from a study can be applied to other situations, other groups of people, the real world.
got it.
So if participants are acting a certain way because of those artificial cues in the lab, well, their behavior might not actually reflect how they'd act in real life.
So it's almost like the act of being in a study changes how people behave.
Precisely. And that's a big problem.
So it's a huge challenge for researchers
Yeah.
to figure out how to navigate these demand characteristics.
It really is. And researchers have come up with some pretty clever strategies to try and minimize or at least account for their influence.
I'm all ears. Lay on us.
Okay. Well, one common approach is deception.
Deception. Okay, elaborate.
So basically, it involves intentionally misleading the participants
Interesting.
about the true purpose of the study.
Like giving them a cover story.
Exactly. So they don't guess what's really going on.
And ethically, you've got to debrief them afterwards, right?
Absolutely. That's crucial.
Okay, so what else?
Another technique is using post-experimental questionnaires.
What does that look like?
So after the study, researchers might ask participants what they thought the research was about.
Oh, clever.
There are even specific scales, like the PARH scale, which stands for Perceived Awareness of the Research Hypothesis.
Okay.
And that gives you some quantitative data on what the participants believe.
So if people who guessed the hypothesis correctly show different results from those who didn't, that's a red flag.
Yeah, it suggests that those demand characteristics might have been at work.
But even asking those questions afterwards could create demand characteristics, right?
You're right, it could. Which is why ideally, a different experimenter should handle those questionnaires.
That makes sense. You don't want the person who ran the study to accidentally confirm or deny the participants' suspicions.
Right, exactly.
So what other tricks do researchers have up their sleeves?
Well, there's something called unobtrusive manipulations and measures.
Okay, break that down.
Basically, it means designing the study in a way that the thing you're changing and the thing you're measuring are not obvious to the participants.
So keeping things subtle and under the radar.
Precisely, so they're less likely to guess what's going on.
So it's all about being sneaky.
In a way, yes. And then, of course, the behavior of the experimenter is incredibly important.
Right, the experimenter themselves can be a demand characteristic.
Yes, and that's where experimenter self-discipline comes in. Avoiding any leading questions or nonverbal cues.
Oh, absolutely.
Clear instructions, standardized procedures, all of that helps.
And using multiple experimenters can help too, right?
It can help to average out any individual biases.
It's almost like the researchers have to be like actors, playing a role to keep the experiment as neutral as possible.
In a sense, yes.
That is so interesting.
And another powerful technique is something called double-blind designs.
Double-blind designs. Okay, I've heard of that. What is that again?
So in a double-blind study, neither the participants nor the researchers who are interacting with them know who's been assigned to which condition.
Wow. So everyone's in the dark.
Pretty much. And that helps minimize all sorts of expectancy effects.
From both the participant and the experimenter.
Exactly.
Okay, that seems like a really solid way to reduce bias.
It's one of the best, and simply minimizing interpersonal contact between the researcher and the participant can also help.
Okay, so less interaction equals less chance of accidental cues.
Exactly.
Makes sense. What about between subject designs?
So a between subject design means that different groups of participants are exposed to different experimental conditions. So any individual participant only experiences one condition, which makes it harder for them to figure out the overall aim of the study.
So if one group gets positive feedback and another gets no feedback,
Right.
they're less likely to realize that the study is about the effects of feedback compared to if each person experienced both conditions.
Exactly. It makes it harder to piece together the puzzle.
Okay, and what about those implicit measures? You mentioned those earlier.
So implicit measures are these indirect ways of assessing things, like attitudes or biases, without directly asking participants.
So instead of saying, hey, tell me about your bias.
Right, which people might not want to admit to, you use a task that reveals those biases without them even realizing it.
So sneaky?
Exactly. And one of the most well-known implicit measures is the implicit association test, or the IAT, which measures automatic associations between concepts.
Oh, interesting.
And because it's not relying on self-report,
Yeah.
it's much less susceptible to these demand characteristics.
So it's like you're getting a more honest, unfiltered response.
You could say that, yes.
It's amazing how creative researchers have to be to get around all these potential pitfalls.
It is. It's a constant challenge, but it's also part of what makes research so fascinating.
So to wrap things up for our listeners,
Right.
the main takeaway is that when we're looking at psychology research, we've got to remember that participants aren't just these blank slates.
Right.
They come into the study with their own interpretations and motivations and these demand characteristics, these little hints and clues that are present in the research environment can really shape how they behave and potentially affect the validity of the findings.
You've summarized it perfectly, and understanding demand characteristics is really crucial if you want to be an informed consumer of research.
It encourages critical thinking.
It does.
About, well, everything.
Absolutely.
It makes you wonder how much these subtle influences are at play in everyday situations. You know, not just in formal research settings, but maybe in a job interview or even how we present ourselves online.
That's a great point. It really highlights how context and perceived expectations can influence behavior way beyond the lab.
So much to think about.
There is.
Well, thank you so much for joining us today and for sharing your insights on this really fascinating and important topic.
It's been my pleasure.
And to all our listeners out there, stay curious, and until next time, keep those brains buzzing.